You don't think no Asian kid that's this size is gonna be dunking.
This is who I am. This is what I'm capable of. All you guys need to do is watch and see.
This kid came out of nowhere and started balling, like, for real.
It wasn't just Asian people talking about it. Everybody was talking about it.
Hi, I'm Chuck Braverman, and this is another episode of Westdoc Online. Today we have a terrific film that's shortlisted from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and the director of the film. And it's an inspiring, exciting short, which I'm going to tell you all about in a second. But I want to remind you that we're brought to you in part by Real Screen Summit. Depending upon when this airs, Real Screen Summit's coming up in Austin very, very soon. It's a fabulous event. I've been there for almost every year in the last 20 years it's been going. And I know a bit about conferences. So I suggest if you're a non-scripted filmmaker, this is a place where you should be. And if you're watching this on our website, westdoconline.com, have you tried going to the news tab? I mean, this morning as I was looking at the news, there was a great story from the Wrap about the Loud family PBS documentary 50 years ago called An American Family. And so I put a link to the story from the Wrap, and there are a whole bunch of other stories if you want to keep up on what's happening on with documentary film. So today it's my pleasure to introduce filmmaker Frank Chi and his film 38 at the Garden. Hi, Frank. How are you?
Hey, Chuck. Thanks for having me. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Same to you. Although when people watch this, it might be July for all we know.
Sorry to time it,
No,
but you know.
that's okay.
We're in the
I
spirit.
always ask my guests, where are they speaking from? Are you? I think you're on the East Coast somewhere, aren't you?
I am speaking to you from rainy Brooklyn, New York.
Well, as we speak, it's actually rainy Los Angeles area here, which is a word you don't really hear too often together.
It's a rarity.
And we're expecting another storm tonight and tomorrow. Wow. Brooklyn, I love Brooklyn. As I've said several times in the past, actually, my father was from Brooklyn, so I feel like I'm part New Yorker.
Well, I'm, I say that like I've been here forever. No, but I moved here in May. I'm a career DC kid. I worked in politics before I entered the ranks of filmmaking. So Brooklyn is still new to me. Well,
actually, I'd love to hear a little bit about your background first. Yeah. And politics is pretty interesting because I don't hear that from most filmmakers. So what is your winding road story to Brooklyn and documentary films?
It's interesting. I've always been a storyteller, and but I was a storyteller in politics, and I was an Obama kid. That's probably the best way to put it. I graduated from college in 2007, and I wanted to make political ads, and I only wanted to work for one person that was running for president, and it was Barack Obama, and I got the dream job. I mean, I was like an assistant on the campaign. It's not like I was like making the ads, but I was 22, and he had made me feel like I belonged in this country for the first time. So when I was 22 years old, I got to, dip my toe into what political media was like for a candidate that was bigger than politics, right? He was a cultural figure. It was the stories that he was telling were cultural stories that he wove into politics. And that's what attracted me to that world. We don't really live in that world anymore. To keep it totally honest, right? It's been 15, 16 years since that experience, and I don't think politics is a place where you can do a lot of cultural storytelling anymore, at least not the right way, in my opinion. And when I sort of started realizing that, I started gravitating more towards where the rest of the storytellers are. Let's put it that way. And obviously that was in filmmaking, and I wanted to make things that were true. So that means it's documentary filmmaking. And I will tell you this, I think my political experience, especially being an Obama kid, is one of the fundamental reasons why 38 The Garden was made. When in 2020, I'll put it this way, right? The origin story of this movie is in 2020, me and my producer, Trayvon Free, we were having a conversation about impossible moments. Like, what is a moment when society at large tells a group of people you can't do something, and then somebody comes out of nowhere and just shatters it to pieces? And the context in which we were talking about it was Obama, because that is like objectively the biggest impossible moment that any of us have lived through. And he was like, you know, what other moments feel like that? And we were just going back and forth, and I was like, man, look, I'm Asian. So there's only one answer. The only other impossible moment that felt like Obama to me was the night Jeremy Lin dropped 38 at the Garden against Kobe and the Lakers. And it was when I said that, that's the birth of the idea. That's why it's called 38 at the Gardens, because I said the two most magical nights of my life are the night that Barack Obama was elected president, and the night Jeremy dropped 38 at the Garden, right? And it was done in that context because, look, there's a way to describe 38 at the Garden without any basketball whatsoever, right? Part one is about stereotypes. Part two is about what happens when someone shatters those stereotypes on the world stage. And then part three is about what happens when those stereotypes are weaponized, and when they're weaponized, they turn into anti-Asian violence. And that's sort of the reason why we made this movie. It's an incredibly entertaining movie. I think we all have a context of how we remember Linsanity, but as an Asian American, as somebody who saw that in a way that is similar to the way Obama made me feel about getting into politics, it was an act of belonging. And that is the reason why we made the film, and I think that's the reason why the film has resonated so much with people since it's come out.
While I'm watching this live, I'm like, this cannot be happening. This cannot be happening.
I think it just blew all of our minds that we would see someone that looked like my cousin dominate on an NBA court.
It's the most impossible thing I think I have ever witnessed in my life.
When most Americans think about Asians, they think about dry cleaners, they think about IT guy.
Small, passive, diminutive, unathletic.
The stereotyping, the derision are so rampant.
You don't think no Asian kid that's this size is gonna be dunking.
This is who I am. This is what I'm capable of. All you guys need to do is watch and see.
This kid came out of nowhere, started balling like for real.
It wasn't just Asian people talking about it. Everybody was talking about it.
The Lakers came in with the idea that we're gonna end this fairy tale, we're gonna end it tonight.
But Jeremy just kept making shots.
He gave all y'all what y'all wanted to see.
Is this the other plot of Space Jam? Like, whose superpowers did Jeremy Lin steal?
Yo, this dude scored 38 points! At the Garden, at the Mecca.
The biggest thing that Sandy brought was hope. It inspired people.
The last few years, Asian Americans have just gotten beaten down. And when I think back on Linsanity, I long to feel those moments of just pure joy and unity.
This moment, it broke the matrix for us.
Where were you raised?
I was raised in Connecticut.
I mean, you said something to me which jumped out right in the beginning about you didn't feel like you belonged here until you worked until Obama happened. And that's somewhat striking to hear from somebody who was raised here. And in a way, I mean, it's striking and it's not striking. I mean, it doesn't shock me, but it does.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Oh, it's the story of Asian Americans, right? Because I think we feel invisible in this society. And, you know, the way America has conversations is very brutal, very honest, especially about race, right? But I think for Asian Americans, we're always just asking, where do we fit? You know? And especially because, like, look, I mean, I'm an immigrant kid. I came here when I was 7, right? I don't really have a context to, like I was born in China, but I don't really remember anything. But all I know is that the minute I became sort of conscious, I was always in a country that basically wasn't telling me that I fit in, right? And then you turn on TV, you know, you see who are the heroes, who are the people that you're told to be like, right? When you're watching American TV, and they don't look like me, right? None of them look like me. The people who look like me on TV when I was growing up were the people who were those stereotypes, right? They were like Long Duck Dong from 16 Candles, right? Like they were walking stereotypes. And, you know, I think when I was a kid, I couldn't figure out why people saw me a certain type of way, right? Like why were people asking me if I knew kung fu, right? Why were people asking me if, like, I mean, just like all of the things that are still stereotypical of Asian people that is portrayed on American media. And it wasn't until like way later when I could answer those questions, and especially as like a cultural storyteller, like I could figure out exactly where those stereotypes came from, right? I mean, it's in many ways is a tragic part of like the way American society views Asian people has been defined by excluding Asian people since like the late 1800s, and that carries on, and it's a tradition in our media that is unfortunately still pretty rampant today. But we don't see heroes, right? There's a great line in the movie that Pablo Torre, the ESPN journalist, says. He's like, like there's like a psychological hack that Asian people go through in this country where we basically identify with people who look nothing like us. And then all of a sudden, this kid comes out of nowhere and he's lighting up the Garden. He's scoring 38 points on Kobe. Like, it broke our brain because it basically said the psychological hack that Asian people had to create to exist and survive in this country, maybe we don't need it, right? That was such an important moment for why Linsanity meant so much.
Were you adopted, or were you raised
No.
by your
I came here like like immigrant family, right? But I came here when I was like 7, but like I think the Asian diaspora story sort of just is like this, And since the movie came out, we've had a lot of conversations with people who are Asian Canadians, right? With people who are Asian Australians. We've had just like if you had to exist with this face in Western society at all, right? There's just this like there's a chip on your shoulder and there's a doubt within you that watching someone like Jeremy and what he did sort of just broke the seal for us. And I think that's why it's really important, at the end of the movie, Lisa Ling, she gives this great line. It's like, like we're all a bunch of Jeremy Lins now. We're just going for it, right? And that kind of action, it doesn't just take urgency, it takes examples. And that's something that I've always carried with me the last 10 years since Linsanity happened. So
how did the film come about? I mean, obviously you had to deal with the NBA and the team and Lin and all that. I mean, was it a piece of cake or was it a minefield?
Wow. One, thank God everything worked out since you and I are talking here, right? But it didn't always feel that way. And I think part of it was, stories need time, right? And especially for someone like Jeremy, because he's still playing, right? He's like 34, 35. He's still very actively like pursuing a basketball career. He played 9 years in the NBA and he's playing overseas now. But, to ask somebody who's still in the middle of their career to look back on their career, that we all probably had conversations with athletes, like that's not something you want to do, right? Because you're still trying to write new chapters. And that was what we were first sort of hearing from Jeremy when we reached out to him, after Trayvon and I had that conversation and we realized just how important of a story it is to tell. We reached out to our other producer, Samir Hernandez, who within like 1 degree of separation had us on the phone with Jeremy. And Jeremy in the beginning was very much like, folks, I'm still actively pursuing a career. I don't want to be defined by Linsanity. I'm not ready to look back. It's not the time, right? And we had to go through a process of convincing Jeremy to do it because of the urgency of now, right? Like 3 years ago, 2 years ago, I wasn't walking down the subway station to go home and standing in the middle of the station so there's no chance somebody could push me onto the tracks, right? Like the urgency of having those stereotypes that followed me around my whole life suddenly be weaponized, suddenly be dangerous, right? Like we have to meet the moment. And I think once we convinced Jeremy that, like, look, we want to make this movie not about you, but about being Asian in America, being different in America, overcoming those stereotypes through example and through hope, right? That's when it broke through, right? That was when Jeremy was like, okay, so if you're not gonna make it about me, then I want to do it. And that, like, look, we've all known celebrities, like, how many people would say that? Like, okay, the only reason why I'll make it is if you don't make it about me, right? He actually, that's why he did the movie. And that's why by the end of the movie, you're not really thinking about him. You're not even thinking about basketball. If you're Asian especially, you're thinking about you. If you feel like you doubt yourself in any capacity, you're thinking about you, right? We've had so many people reach out, especially when he hits that Toronto buzzer beater in the movie. We've had so many people reach out to us, whether they're, and anyone who's been doubted at work, who feels like they don't take their shot at work, right? People have been like writing to us being like, hey, I watched your movie and I asked for a promotion. And I got it 3 months later. Like, this is crazy, right? But like, it's about the sense of doubt that like anybody knows what kind of stereotypes might follow them around into a room, into a meeting, down the street, right? It's about how you confront them. It's about how you choose to take your shot at the right moment. And again, going back to the idea of examples, right? I think his example really lit up a spark in people that we were able to revisit 10 years later in 38 The Garden, and I think we did it justice. But that hurdle, that was the biggest hurdle, right? And then the other part of it too was like, to be totally real with you, look, obviously we love HBO, and HBO were the ones who came in and said yes. But a couple of folks who we thought were like sure bets. I mean, once we had Jeremy, we were like, this is a piece of cake. I mean, this is one of the most famous Asian Americans. Like, I mean, this is a huge story. Everybody knows Linsanity, right? And we went to a couple places that we thought were definitely going to say yes, and they definitely didn't, right? And we had to be like, okay, well then what do we do? So we went to like a group of like Asian tech investors, people who were around my age who remember Linsanity in a similar way, right? And we raised the money that way. It was done independently through
so you
one
made
of our
the
producers,
film
Dave Luke.
before you went to HBO. You had the film going.
Oh yeah, we had to raise the money to do all of the interviews and to have the budget to put together a very rough string out.
And what about
then that's when HBO came in, and that's when they heard about the project.
What about NBA?
Well, so Samir, one of our producers, he's just got a great relationship around the sports world, and we were in good conversation with the NBA. We didn't have to finalize what footage we used until the very end, right before Tribeca, to really say, hey, we've got to officially put this out. But the NBA's been so good to us throughout this process, partly because they also recognize the importance of this story.
It's only the best kind of PR and inspiring story on every level for not only the NBA, of course, but for the world. I mean, I must say, I hate to admit I'm not really a basketball fan. I love baseball. I grew up, like I said, I'm from Brooklyn. I was, my blood is Dodger blue, as they say.
Blue.
And I grew up, going to Rams games, and so I like baseball and football, and I was a fan of, Kareem and the Lakers and all that, but I didn't really pay any attention to it. And to be honest, wasn't even aware of the story somehow, And I stumbled upon the film in the list when the short list was a long list, and watched it. And I got to say, it is the most exciting, most amazing, inspiring show. You don't have to be a basketball fan to watch this film.
Not at all.
And say, oh my goodness, this is a fabulous experience just to see it, and just a joy. So congratulations to that.
Thank you.
What about Lisa Ling, who you have on camera in the film, commenting throughout? And I noticed she has a executive producer credit in it. So what was her involvement? How involved was she, or how helpful, or whatever?
Yeah, so so much of us pushing this movie out since then has been with Lisa's help, right? And obviously her saying yes to the interview. I mean, you could tell how excited she was. She showed up in a Linsanity jersey, right? Like part of this was just to have her lens on this was invaluable, because we've got the way we broke down the interviews is this, right? It's a serious topic by the end of it, for sure. But we have a lot of comedians who disarm you with humor in the beginning, right? And then we've got a lot of commentary from people, whether it's a sports journalist who was there from the beginning, like Pablo Torre, or someone who covers obviously very serious topics for CNN, like Lisa Ling, right? And to have that lens, especially when we got to part 3, to talk about society, to talk about what happens when those stereotypes weaponize and turn into anti-Asian violence. Like Lisa's voice and the way that she comes into the story is so crucial. Beyond just being a fan and talking about stereotypes in the first couple of sections. Like, I mean, I would say like Lisa like nails the ending in a way that I think she, as a singular figure, like I don't think anybody else could have done it the way that she did. And we're just so appreciative of how she's been involved in this process.
How long did the process take from the moment you said, well, we should make this film, let's raise the money, do the interviews, to we have a deal and we've got the film?
So I actually was just looking back on like my folder, just seeing what the dates were a couple of days ago. We came up with the idea late 2020. The deck was put together in February of 2021. We had our first conversation with Jeremy in April of 2021. We got him on board in July of 2021. We got a bunch of no's that summer. We started raising money later that summer, and then October 26th was our first shoot date of 2021. January 3rd was our last shoot date, and then by May 2022 we had submitted it to Tribeca. So it's been
And where did HBO fit into that, do you think?
HBO saw the cut, a very, very rough cut in January of 2022 after we finished our final interview, and we were able to put together something very, very, very rough. And they were like, we are game. We are game. And that has been, I mean, they've given us the kind of resources and the kind of team that really, I mean, that's the product that you see on HBO right now, because, you know, they put it on like their whole editing and mix team, right? Like the HBO like style, right? That came in when they signed on to the project.
Was this part of HBO Sports or HBO Documentary Unit?
HBO Documentaries.
Well,
It's, I mean, like, you know, when we told that story to folks, people are like, that's a very unorthodox way of doing it. I'm like, yeah, like, we were sort of just doing it by the string of our, by the what's it called, by the skin of our teeth. Like,
right.
That's the way it felt this whole time. And it sort of, honestly, it sort of goes to tell you just, like, how hard it is to tell Asian stories, like Asian American stories especially. And, I mean, even though, like, Linsanity is one of the most famous ones, if not the most famous, like modern Asian American story.
Well, you know,
it's hard.
It's so much broader than that, really, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, I hope it's an American story.
It is,
and not,
that's what we were trying to push, right? But when you talk to execs, they don't try. They're not seeing it that way initially. They're just seeing it as like demo, right? They're not seeing it as like, oh my God, this is huge. But, you know, we can talk about my frustrations with the industry some other day.
I'd like to ask, and usually I get some kind of an answer, what if you're comfortable telling me the area of the budget or what you spent, but, you know, I'm curious also what you raised before you got to
Sure.
HBO, and then if you are comfortable telling me the neighborhood of what a short goes for these days at HBO.
I'm not the business end of this. I don't even know what the final number was, but I can tell you what the initial number was, the amount that we raised to get it in front of HBO, right? Like all the interviews and then that money for a very rough cut. We raised, so independently, we raised $120,000.
And that, I assume, was to pay for obviously very talented camera people to help make it look professional, which it does.
Yeah.
And do it right. And
yes. But I don't know where obviously it went up from there. Obviously, I don't know what the number was, but the NBA footage costs a lot. Let's just keep it real, right? But I mean, you could probably tell, like, to get all the footage was shot with less than 120K, right? And that is a testament in of itself to how scrappy and how much by the skin of our teeth we were operating.
It's funny, if an independent goes to the NBA or the baseball, league or basketball or football, and you want to buy footage, it's very expensive. But on this kind of project, you'd think, gee, they should throw anything at you that you want in a way. Of course they're running a business, but like I say, this is the best PR that you could possibly have in a way, right?
All I can say is we are extremely appreciative to the NBA for working with us the way that they did. I've heard nightmare stories about other sports entities. It was not that kind of experience with us, but also I think partly because they saw it early for what it was. I think if we were just doing a retelling of Linsanity, play by play what happened, I think everybody would have treated us the way that you would treat just a normal sports story, a normal sports doc, right? But it wasn't that, and we knew that from the very beginning. I was just saying this the other day. It is remarkable how much we stuck to the script, given that it's a documentary. Not that we had it laid out line by line or scene by scene, but spirit. That's what I mean, right? We knew that we wanted the first part to be about growing up with stereotypes. We knew we wanted the second part to be about the meat of the game and that whole stretch of what it meant. And we knew we wanted the last part to pivot to anti-Asian violence. And we did that. And we explained that as division from the get. Some people didn't get it. But the people who did are the ones who helped us and the ones who put us in front of you.
What are you working on next?
I can't say yet, but I will have updates soon. But you can imagine what kind of stories I like, right? They are about belonging. They are about defying the odds. I'm not this is my first movie, so I'm not sitting here being like, hey, I know exactly how I want to tell stories. I need to experiment. I need to sort of figure out, are sports movies the only movies I want to make because they're so kinetic? I love how kinetic sports documentaries are. Other than music, it's just really hard to recreate that kind of feeling, getting people on the edge of their seat the way that sports and music does, right? I'm still trying to figure that out myself, right? I come from politics. Do I want to make political stories? I don't know. The stories now in politics are not very interesting to me, right? Because we're sort of absent culture now, especially, honestly, any part of the Democratic Party is absent of culture. Whether you want to go from Bernie Sanders to Joe Biden, there's just not a lot of storytelling that the way that Obama sort of changed the way we spoke about politics. So it's sort of boring to me right now. But I'm trying to figure that out, right? Experimentation after a project like this is really, really important, just to figure out what your comfort zone is and what your just methods of storytelling are.
What was the editing process like?
So our first editor, who put together the very rough cut, his name is Jesse Strauss. He is my editor from politics. We've made hundreds of political ads together, right? And I think that is a product of my comfort and my trust in Jesse. But once HBO came on board, it was with our HBO editors. We worked with this guy named James Pilot, who is just a wizard. He moves at the speed of light in a way that I was like, oh my God, right? Making political ads is very different in that you sort of do everything, right? It's a very scrappy process. You're the editor, you're the director, you're the cinematographer, you're the gaffer, you're everything. And just once I saw how HBO operated, how people in film operate in general, just everybody has a very specific task and they're so good at it, they move at the speed of light, right? And that, as somebody from my background, I just wasn't used to.
So what does that mean in terms of time? How much time did he spend recutting the film and shaping it to what it ended up being?
A couple months. Nothing crazy, right? A couple months. And given that it's still my first movie, I don't have other references to, but by all means and purposes, I've been told that that's extremely fast. Yeah, like that is probably a good indication of just how much of a priority HBO put the movie when we were in that stage as well.
Anything I haven't asked you that you think is important?
Right, I think one of the reasons why we made it a short was because we didn't want to give people any excuses not to watch. We wanted to be the most accessible viewing experience you can find. And if I can say it in 38 minutes instead of 90, why not? You know, we did an interview with Chuck Todd for when he did Meet the Press at Doc NYC, and he said, you know, like, maybe you come for the basketball and you stay for the education. I love that quote because that's exactly why we made it, right? Like, you know, you are a basketball fan, so you want to relive this moment from 10 years ago. And then you, by the end of it, understand exactly what kind of experience he had to go through and a lot of Asian Americans had to go through to even celebrate that moment or to live that moment. And that is like, you know, Chuck Todd summed it up better than anything I could have said.
Thank you so much, Frank, for being a guest on Westdoc. Really enjoyed speaking with you.
Chuck, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.